So it is the 31st of August 2023. It's a full moon, end of the month, and this is a Bitcoin update. Hope everyone's doing okay with this choppy correction that we've been in for April. For me, the key question is this big correction that we've been in since the April high over, or have we got one more push lower before we go lower? If I take a look at where we are here on the big weekly chart, you can see that this is what I mean by my first big 5 waves up. Now we're in a 3-wave correction, so unless that changes, for me this is just a big correction before a really nice new big upswing. I'm hoping that that comes in September, but it could be that we trade sideways into year end here, and this becomes a bigger 1, 2, 3 wave correction, and we could drop lower. We could come back to retest that 20,000 level, but at the moment my kind of base case is it's just choppy and we haven't bottomed yet. So I think if you're one of these people who dollar cost average into Bitcoin, that it's not a terrible idea to be buying any place in a correction. But if you're actively trading it, then we kind of need to wait for a better signal. For me, on the when I look at this, trading underneath these weekly moving averages keeps me a little bit bearish. So if I not a little bit bearish, but still in correction. So here you can see with this weekly 200 moving average, previously it's been amazing support for Bitcoin to launch from, but lately we've been kind of back and forward through it. But even when we're back and forward through it, it becomes pretty interesting support and resistance. It was resistance here, then support, resistance, messy support. And so I'm going to stick with that. Last week when we had this nasty drop underneath, I said if we had a weekly close more than 50% up of this big Maribosu candle on the open close, that we would be going up again. And in terms of, that's what candlestick traders would be looking at for a bullish reversal. And that 50% level of the open close of last week is really where we've, haven't been able to get above 27,700. Even here on the daily, you can see that that's where we couldn't close above. So important resistance at 27,700. And likewise, when now we're here on a daily chart, we can apply that Maribosu line 50% back of the open close theory to this candle here and say 26,923 then becomes kind of important bullish support if we're going to do another leg higher, I think. So sideways. Now we had some ETF news, haven't we, that Grayscale are allowed to appeal. They're being refused a spot Bitcoin ETF. It's not it's not an ETF approval, but the SEC are going to have to explain themselves. We've got a lot of comments that we know are coming due from all of the other spot applications that they've had, ARC and so on. So we do have Bitcoin news coming that could decide whether we push up higher from here and this correction is over, or whether we have got one more push lower to come. If we are looking for one more push lower, for me, my ideal, normally when you see this kind of flat correction, 23,800 is kind of, if we do one more swing lower, is where I'm looking for at the moment. But at the moment, honestly, this could go either way. And so although other markets are all looking at the inflation data that we've got today, with PCE, the consumer inflation data, and the jobs numbers tomorrow as to what the Federal Reserve are going to do, I think most of the crypto market is really going to be looking at what the ETF news is going to be. And I think it could, even if it's not good news and no ETF yet, I think it'll give us a dip to buy. Most people, I get a lot of people asking me whether I think we're going to, I don't see why we couldn't get a spot ETF. It seems to me completely ridiculous that we have an ETF permitted that is based on the futures price, but we're not allowed to have an ETF based on the underlying of that futures price and actual Bitcoin. But, you know, one is the, you know, one is the CFTC, one is the SEC. I think there's a lot of pressure from the US government for them to kind of shut down crypto. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do it with this. Given that they've just had this loss in court with this review, I'm not sure that they're going to approve any ETFs straight away. I think they're going to try and save a little bit of face. And so we should expect a dip, and well, that's kind of my hope, my preferred thinking on this. I think we should get a dip that will be possible to buy. A daily close back underneath then 27,000 or 26,923 would be quite bearish. Otherwise, I'm looking for one more push higher in this sideways range, and we'll see how we go, you know. Big picture, this dip that we get, or when this correction that we've been in since April is over, I think that the next swing higher is going to be a really big one. It should be a wave 3. People will make a lot of money, and so, but only if you've still got some capital and you don't get chopped up in this correction. And we will get a really clear signal when it's bottomed. It's not going to go up in a straight line without you. And so I think it's quite a good idea to make sure you don't get chopped up in this summer sideways correction and wait for that better opportunity. If I take a look at where we are with ETH. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Let's take a look at this Bitcoin here. I've got RSIs. You know, I like to use a CCI for a trade trigger, but I'm using RSI here. And it's incredible to me how often the 50% level in the middle of RSI is support and trend support and trend resistance. And here we are kind of back at that in the middle 50% level. So it could really, we really are in a position right sideways at the daily 200 moving average, waiting for an SEC decision. Now, I would normally say, well, God, it seems obvious that we should have a spot ETF. And it will make it easier for people to trade Bitcoin. But we already have a spot ETF in Europe. And it hasn't made that much difference to, you know, Bitcoin. You know, we already have one. But because America has been so choked off, I think the ETF is going to be a much bigger deal. But we need to be careful with ETFs. You can sell as well as buy. And remember the hype. Everything's going to be better when we get a futures, Bitcoin futures. And when Bitcoin futures came, of course, that was the high at the start of a really kind of nasty bear market. So a little bit of caution. But yes, initially, it's going to be really good. And there is another big swing for Bitcoin coming. Sometimes we get a better clue as to what's going on for ETH. Let's take a look at where we are today with ETH. I don't kind of have the same count in ETH, but if we were to, again, draw that three-wave correction, although we're sitting very nicely here on this 200 moving average, in this correction that we've basically been in for the past year, we have each time we've dipped to the lows gone underneath the weekly 200 moving average, and it's held us down, and then it's been support. And so I feel like we could take another dip underneath this 200 moving average to the bottom of the channel. And that will be very useful, because then when we're going back up again, as you can see previously, when we closed and got back above the 200 moving average, that was a really good sign that we've bottomed. So far this price action sideways at this weekly 200 moving average for the last 2 weeks has not been inspiring for a bottom. It looks like a pretty nasty, you know, regular sideways correction in a downtrend. Now, if I measure the swings from this high to this low, I'm going to line it up, don't worry. You can see that we haven't quite tagged the low. And that, you know, in crypto likes to tag the low. So that would be 1510. But I also use this 61.8 level, which is 1708, as quite a good indicator of the bottom. So if we are not going to tag that low, and if it's going to get front run, and if we hold 1708, we're going up. So as you can see, we're right sideways at decision levels in these markets. Very, very tricky. And I would say keep an eye on it. I think it's okay to have a small position. It's a bit like when we were waiting for a court decision with Ripple. You know, it's like having a lottery ticket. But I wouldn't be over leveraged, because there is a risk that the SEC will disappoint and we will have one more swing lower. Okay, so most altcoins are not performing very well the last few days. They're pretty negative. The one that has really outperformed with a 10% jump is Maker. Let's take a look at where we are with Maker. Let's start first off with this weekly chart. And you can see on the weekly, we had a really nice bullish, let's clean up completely. Very nice bullish reversal, bullish cross of our weekly moving averages. We've pulled back to the 20 moving average. We've pulled back to this swing high. If we're going to make another level swing high, this is a really cool place to do it from. If we measure the swing, so this first swing low to high, and we project this one here, this was 1.618 of the first swing. That's normally very indicative of a wave 3 or an impulse leg. The most common retrace of that wave 3 is a 38.2. That's exactly 10,042 where we have held on this weekly, although we've had a look underneath it. We haven't closed underneath it. We made a very nice kind of Adam and Eve bottom here. That's where you make a spike low and then you get this rounded retest. And, you know, the confirmation is breaking these highs here and the daily 50. So for me, I think we've made a bottom and we're going to keep swinging higher in Maker, potentially for a fifth wave, so new highs for the year or the last couple of years, as long as we can hold above this daily 50 moving average, which is at 1126 on the close. And this is another one where a little bit of a pullback might be a little bit of a gift. So I'm watching Maker. Now, first, I'm going to say when I'm not sure what's going on, or if we're actually going to make it or not, I put my fibs on the correction high to low. So here's our big 4-hour correction. And I go level to level. So we're not quite at this 50%, but I look at the fib levels like a staircase. You know, as long as we hold above the previous one, we're still going up. So here's our 236 fib. As long as we back tested it, we're now above the 38.2. So we're still going up. We're not in a bigger correction as long as we hold 1129. And if we do, we are likely to see a bigger pullback before we go up again. I'm not saying that it's a sell necessarily. That's just where we are. And the broader market will matter. But definitely Maker is outperforming. And so then we go level to level till we get to the highs and then new highs, happy days. If we go out to the weekly moving averages again, you can see we're holding above all of them. There's no weekly 200 yet in Maker. And so the only bigger, you know, I really kind of think that this has a bit of a look of a very nice rounded bottom that's been building for a long time. So I'm going to say that this horizontal level here, let's put it in here, is going to be the key level first, 1299, basically 1300, and then above 1300 we're out of this really nice sideways range. I'm going to go high to low, all the way down, and then the next target would be these lows. There's 236 fib at 1882. So potentially, you know, this is a kind of the weekly chart that I live for, looks really good, but we could have a little bit of a bumpy pullback before we get going. But in terms of just the way this is structured and the moving averages and everything, says to me that this should continue to go higher, looking for a breakout. Okay, and there's one other coin. Let's take a look at Komodo. Now, if I go to a weekly chart of Komodo, here obviously we're in a downtrend, trading at new lows. We're underneath the lows from 2021, and that's going to be quite tough resistance. We haven't been able to close above it, but we're in this sideways. And when I notice with this One is if we go down to the daily moving averages, every time we get above these daily moving averages, we get a really nice push higher. At the moment, we're closing underneath them, but last week or 2 weeks ago, we had this really sharp swing. And, you know, corrections, even if they are only corrections, are usually 3 waves. So we've had this sharp up move, 3 waves back, have only pulled halfway back. I think that we should see at least, at minimum, if it's not a bottom, another leg higher in Komodo. And if we go down to the 4-hour here, here's our sharp rally, here's our big 3-wave correction. Pull back to all of these 4-hour moving averages, turning higher. We're still underneath them with the daily. So the important thing for me is going to be closing back above this daily 200. If we're going to fail, that's going to be around there, around 2.6, but back above it. I think we should see another nice big measured move higher and potentially back to the top of this wedge for a third touch. If this is a triangle, and then if this was just a 3-wave correction, we'll break out. So if we're building a triangle, this will be resistance, and if this 1, 2, 3 correction was it, we'll break out and do another big leg higher. So that's what I'm looking for in Komodo. So key level on the upside is this 200 moving average, which is at 0.267. Good luck. I'll be back with other